there was an idea that we could do something different than what was being done in Hollywood.
Hi everyone, welcome again to the series Making the Conversation.
Who's interested in these two anyway?
Since when are you here to be entertained? Here?
Sometimes it's nice to know what they're talking about.
I don't care what they're talking about. All I want is a nice fat recording.
As we saw in the last episode, Francis Ford Coppola and George Lucas had created an alternative film studio in San Francisco called American Zoetrope.
I wanted to have that kind of Jack Kerouac, beat poems, pretty girls, that bohemian life.
Francis was a gifted man. We all knew it. And George Lucas, who everybody thought was extraordinary, all that knew him felt that he was a sort of potential cinema genius.
They needed financing and distribution for the project.
The regime at Warner Brothers had changed, and I tried to parlay sponsoring George's film, which was THX 1138, and then some of the other fellas.
Thanks to his personal conviction and his legendary persuasion powers, Coppola managed to make an incredible agreement with Seven Arts, a new division created within Warner Brothers to produce small-budget films.
We would help subsidize Zoetrope. They would work out of San Francisco.
And he came and he said, George, I got to tell you, we succeeded. Not only did I get THX off the ground, but I got 6 other movies.
Francis would be the parental figure, at least as he presented it.
I got 7 movies, magic number for him. That was the moment that American Zoetrope was really born.
In this episode, we will keep analyzing the creative process of the conversation, and we'll also learn about the Directors Company, a film enterprise with a very short but interesting life.
I showed THX to John Calley, and basically John Calley absolutely couldn't believe that we had made this film. He hated it so much.
They said, we don't want any of these movies.
Shortly after that, all the scripts were all basically turned down and rejected.
So then he demanded that Francis pay all the money back immediately, and he owed the studio like $400,000.
Zoetrope Studios in San Francisco was in a terrible financial crisis.
Francis didn't have the money. George didn't have, none of us had the money.
I remember discussions whether Francis should take the job or not.
Richard Brooks, Costa Gravas, Elia Kazan, Arthur Penn, they all turned it down.
Francis, he only made 3 films, but he was Italian.
I started encouraging Francis to think about her survival more than anything else.
Remember George Lucas saying, just take the job, do it, just get the money, and then we can do what we want to do.
I'm not going to put this crap on screen.
Time had come for us to get into lifeboats. Basically, this Godfather idea was a lifeboat.
And they objected to almost every major character who was cast. They didn't want Brando. They didn't want Pacino.
Who do you want to play the Godfather? I want Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando will never be in a film by Paramount.
Francis had to fight for all of these people.
The scene where Michael kills Sollozzo and McCluskey is a pivotal scene for all kinds of reasons. It was also the scene that when Francis was shooting prevented Francis from actually being fired off the film. The feeling up to that point was, what is this movie? But when that scene was seen by the head of the corporation, then all the pressure that was on Francis disappeared.
Francis could work under battle conditions or under conditions of peace. I suspect that his best work comes when he's under the gun.
He had a kind of Jedi mind trick to convince the studio that what they absolutely did not want was, in fact, the best idea.
I will now go straight to the awards. For the best screenplay based on material from another medium, the nominees are
Coppola has always considered himself more a writer than a director.
And the winner is Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather.
In an interview with Brian De Palma on the making of the conversation published on the 7th volume of Filmmakers Newsletter, Coppola said, quote, "Basically I want to write original film works. That is not based on books.
Firstly, I'd like to thank Peter Bart
who was responsible for getting me this job in the first place, which sort of rescued me from my wonderful romantic financial adventure in San Francisco, which still lives.
I don't feel myself to be my definition of successful until I can take something, either out of my memory or my past or my ideas, and make it into a really effective motion picture. So both The Rain People and The Conversation were personal tests to see if I could do it, get through it, and make it work. End of the quote.
I wanted to follow in the footsteps of the great Europeans that we admired in the late 50s and early 60s, more in the nature of La Dolce Vita or 8½, big films, but personal films from original work, much as The Conversation was totally an original story.
Before the whole adventure of Zoetrope and still being a student at UCLA Film School, Coppola had started his career in the film industry working with Roger Corman, the king of B-movies. Corman was known for making very cheap and fast movies oriented to young audiences.
This is a death race.
This genre was known as exploitation.
Death Race 2000.
Francis Ford Coppola worked with you before he really worked with anyone else, isn't that true?
Yes, right. As a matter of fact, he was the sound man, the second assistant director, and shot second unit all on one picture.
Really?
Very versatile.
One of the reasons for making them so cheap was by hiring undergraduate students as technicians and actors.
He just took advantage of that fresh blood, so to speak, and that fresh energy, the enjoyment, the craziness of making a picture in 15 days.
Coppola's first film as a director was Dementia 13. Corman asked him to write a cheap copycat of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. He wrote the script in just one night, and Corman was so impressed that gave him the chance to direct it. Coppola was only 25 years old.
Mr. Corleone, would you kindly identify for the committee the gentleman sitting to your left?
I can answer that.
I think The Conversation represents for me what it was as a younger man I had chosen to do with my career, writing pieces like this.
Coppola tried to make a name for himself in Hollywood, becoming a screenwriter for others. He co-wrote the scripts for This Property is Condemned, a drama directed by Sidney Pollack with Natalie Wood, and Is Paris Burning, a French film directed by René Clément about the liberation of Paris from the Nazis during World War II. A couple of years later, he co-wrote the script for Patton, along with Edmund H. North.
The winner is...
This earned him his first Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay.
Francis Ford Coppola and Edmund H. North of Patton!
This film starts with a long shot just like The Conversation.
This opening shot is a signature shot of a Francis Coppola film, particularly from this era. Patton, which he wrote, begins with a long single shot of George C. Scott giving a speech in front of a big American flag. The Godfather begins with a lengthy shot of Bonacera.
And of course, Apocalypse Now.
The opening of Apocalypse was made out of some junk film that had been thrown away in a barrel, which was the front end of one of the multiple cameras of the napalm bomb dropping. So I reached into the garbage and picked up this and said, "Oh, what's this?" and put it in the Moviola in art. Accident and discovery happened.
This is different. We don't have anyone talking, but it is a long single shot that opens a film. In the early 70s, when transistors started having their effect, we found a way to make zooms programmable. So you could say, over the 3 minutes that this shot takes, I want the zoom to go from 25 millimeters to 120 millimeters, and the zoom would execute this perfectly.
With the money earned with the script of Is Paris Burning, Coppola decided to buy the rights of a novel to adapt it into a script, combine it with some personal ideas, and direct what would be his second film as a director, You're a Big Boy Now, released through Warner Brothers in 1966. He also presented it as a thesis project in UCLA in order to get his Master's of Fine Arts degree. After that, the movie version of the Broadway musical Finian's Rainbow. This resulted on The Rain People, written, directed, and produced by Coppola himself.
It was an original screenplay about a wife coming to terms with a pregnancy that she did not really want. She wasn't ready to have a kid yet. She gets in her car and travels across country with this baby inside her, and along the way she picks up a hitchhiker.
The Rain People I wrote while I was still a UCLA student, and I went through that exact experience.
She flirts with him, but he turns out he's brain damaged because of a football accident. And the subtext of the film is that this brain damaged college student becomes the proxy for the child that she's carrying in her womb.
The Ring People was a critical success and won the Golden Share at the 1969 San Sebastian Film Festival.
However, I had begun another screenplay in that interim, which was The Conversation, and the notion of making it was going to be very, very problematic because I really had no source to get the money for it. And although I tried, I went to Europe, I tried to meet people like Carlo Ponti, or having no luck, I was waiting or hoping that I could do it when circumstances came my way that got me to direct The Godfather.
This huge success at his early 30s opened him completely the gates of Hollywood.
When the picture opened, the night it opened, Henry Kissinger said to me, you know, Bob, here's a man who's a killer, a gangster. And yet when he dies, those people in the audience were all crying. That's touching greatness. This man, Coppola, has such greatness.
The executives at Paramount were completely delighted with this talented young man and made him an offer he couldn't refuse.
I don't believe that Paramount Studios was particularly interested in this script, but they were extremely interested in Francis and very, very interested in Francis directing Godfather 2. But Francis said, I'll only do Godfather 2 if you will allow me to make The Conversation, which is this film I've been wanted to make for a long time.
The Directors Company was a short-lived film enterprise created by Paramount Pictures in the early 70s.
Charlie Bludorn was the head of Gulf Western, which was a giant conglomerate who had bought Paramount. He was a very dynamic entrepreneur, buying and selling companies and countries and God knows what all.
Bludorn gathered together the three most successful young directors of that time in American cinema. William Friedkin, who had just made The French Connection, Peter Bogdanovich, director of The Last Picture Show, and Coppola, who came from the huge success of The Godfather. They were allowed to make any film they wished with only two conditions: that each project should be greenlighted by all of the three directors, and that the budget for each movie should be under $3 million.
Really, The Conversation led to Godfather 2, which was already on the charts. I had taken advantage of the little break between the two films and used my newfound importance in Hollywood to finance The Conversation, which, as I mentioned earlier, was not forthcoming. Nobody wanted to do it.
Part of the agreement for the Directors Company was also that each filmmaker would be allowed to have a protege who could make a film for the company. Bogdanovich chose Orson Welles, who was working at that time on his project The Other Side of the Wind. And Coppola chose George Lucas, who presented them the project of Star Wars, but neither Friedkin or Bogdanovich were enthusiastic about it, so they passed. The Directors Company only got 3 movies made on his short life: Paper Moon, The Conversation, and Daisy Miller. The first one, directed by Bogdanovich, was a critical and commercial success. It was followed by The Conversation, which was not as financially successful as Paper Moon, but received some critical acclaim. The third and last film produced by the company was Daisy Miller, also by Bogdanovich, and based on a novel by Henry James. Against everyone's opinions, he gave the main role to his girlfriend Sybil Shepherd, who was a very limited actress.
Sybil Shepherd, you remember her from The Heartbreak Kid and The Last Picture Show?
It was a complete failure, both critical and economically, and one of the main reasons of the ending of the Directors Company. The other reason was the internal fighting over The Conversation between the 3 associated directors. Friedkin did not like it and thought it was a ripoff of Blow Up. Without having directed a single film for the Directors Company, Friedkin decided to leave and work on another project on his own, The Exorcist. With one of the 3 members out, Charlie Bludorn decided to cancel the agreement with Coppola and Bogdanovich.
When it comes time to writing, I like to write.
Coppola's approach to the task of writing a script is very different, depending on if he is writing an adaptation from a book or if he is writing an original story. When he adapts a book, he uses what he calls a prompt book.
A prompt book is sort of an old tradition from theater, and basically you take a sheet of loose leaf paper, and I sat there myself and I cut out this hole in the middle of the page, and then I pulled my book apart that I had made those comments on, and I myself pasted every page of the novel onto sheets of paper like this.
This prompt book technique leaves the screenwriter plenty of room on those margins to write all kinds of observations about the book he's adapting.
This document was a kind of multi-layered roadmap for me to direct the film. And I remember when I did direct the film, although there was a script, obviously, I tended to take this around and work on The Godfather. Again, I had that kind of canvas bag where I could carry this, and I was more interested in really working from this because on one level it had the actual book rather than a screenplay.
But when he writes an original script, he goes with a tape recorder and speaks to it all the ideas that come to his mind.
Alright, this is tape 1 on Monday in June 17th or so in the Café Trieste. Tape 1 for the conversation, second draft.
He used it to go in the 60s and 70s to do that to a cafeteria in San Francisco called Café Trieste.
December in San Francisco, the downtown area, centering around Union Square. Decorations are already up, electricity turned on in the middle of the afternoon, and the crowds of shoppers have swelled with office workers out for their lunch hours. Lunch hour, period. Uncoded titles are presented in simple letters over a full view of the park.
Although the conversation is an original screenplay, there are some references to other works.
The balance of the film from the outset was an uneasy combination of Alfred Hitchcock and Hermann Hesse, who is a German author who wrote a number of seminal novels in the early part of the 20th century, notably Steppenwolf, from whom many elements of Harry Cole's character are drawn.
We already saw in the previous episode its relationship with Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up, but Coppola has also admitted that Hermann Hesse's novel Steppenwolf is a major influence.
I had read Siddhartha and I had read Steppenwolf, and I thought I wanted to make a film somewhat in that genre, which was, kind of focused on an intriguing, solitary character. And just as I was inspired or certainly took Blow Up as something to try to imitate, equally I had Steppenwolf rolling around in my head.
Even the name of the protagonist, Harry Cole, is very similar to the main character of the novel, Harry Haller.
The elements of the murder mystery, the whodunit, the suspense thriller from Hitchcock were fused with a character study of this anonymous, middle-class nerd technician, you might say. And that's not an easy combination to pull off, but it was Francis's intention from the beginning to do this.
During his career, Coppola has had the chance to work with some of the best directors of photography. Gordon Willis left his personal fingerprint on the Godfather saga. Vittorio Storaro made the astonishing images of Apocalypse Now and One from the Heart, and the German DOP Michael Ballhaus created the gothic visual world for Bram Stoker's Dracula. For the conversation, Coppola chose initially Haskell Wexler.
Shooting on Conversation started at the end of November in 1972. Haskell Wexler was the cinematographer, and Francis and Haskell had worked together just recently on American Graffiti, which was shot that summer.
Coppola was impressed by Wexler's work on the film Medium Cool, especially for his use of cinema verite-style documentary filmmaking techniques, as well as for combining fictional and non-fictional content.
There was a tremendous amount of footage generated by this scene in Union Square. The characters in the scene are actually moving around in a real environment, saying their lines, and nothing is arranged in exact detail. There's a great amount of chance. All of this was photographed surreptitiously, very much the way the sound is supposedly being recorded. What that meant was 6 cameras shooting for at least 6 minutes each, over and over and over again.
The film was begun with Haskell Wexler as the director of photography, but after the completion of the main opening sequence, which involved the elaborate multi-camera setup at Union Square and the actual shooting with long lenses of the conversation, ultimately, due to a difference of opinion, the two of us decided that we saw it slightly differently.
Haskell had second thoughts about the screenplay, And once they started shooting, those second thoughts became third thoughts. He didn't like the Harry Cole character and felt that that was going to be very frustrating for an audience, that character was too hesitant about things.
Haskell saw it in a slightly more romantic style, more like, in his words, the Thomas Crown affair, and I saw it more as medium cool. So
this tension came to a head about a month later, and the issue had nothing to do with script. It was about the concept of backlight. And Francis had chosen a location for the Robert Duvall office, the director, in an office building in San Francisco that had windows, floor-to-ceiling windows, and Francis wanted the light to seem to come from outside. He didn't want to supplement the light inside. There they were confronting this problem, and I wasn't present at the time, but apparently words were exchanged, the situation got heated, and the result was that it was coming up for Christmas, and Francis declared that the film was going to stop shooting over the Christmas holidays and that Haskell was not going to come back after Christmas.
Then I turned to my old colleague on The Rain People, Wilmer Butler, and he, completed or did 3/4 of the movie and was very helpful to getting the vision that I was looking for.
Bill Butler had worked previously with Coppola on The Rain People. Due to the special production conditions of that film, Butler had promised Coppola that he would only need 20 fixtures of 1,000 watts each to illuminate it. He kept his word, and when Wexler left the conversation, Coppola knew who was the man for the job.
We become, at some point in the movie, the Harry Cole, the eavesdroppers, eavesdropping on the eavesdropper, so to speak.
Together they came up with the idea of using the cameras for the conversation as if they were part of a surveillance system.
Unlike most modern movies, if you watch the lower corner or upper corner of any movie, you'll see that it's constantly adjusting. It's constantly, the cameraman is trying to make a good picture and follow. In the conversation, I wanted the camera just to be dead.
In the interview with Brian De Palma previously mentioned, Coppola says, quote, "We wanted a camera which gave the impression that it didn't have an operator on it, just like a supermarket TV camera."
If an actor walked out of the frame and something important happened outside the field of view, it would not show it. It would literally be off screen unless it stayed off long enough that the camera realized it wasn't really getting the scene, and quite mechanically it would like pan over to the left later, too late. I was very taken with this notion of the camera sort of disassociated from the camera operated, and I used some of these techniques in the latter half of The Godfather Part 2, I think notably in the scenes perhaps in Lake Tahoe when Fredo is confronted by his brother, and
I'm smart and I want respect!
Some of the style of the camera just remaining where it is, and the characters walking out of frame and you hear part of the dialogue.
Mikey.
Off frame was derived from what we were doing here in the conversation.
In the end of the movie, Harry Cole falls into a state of complete paranoia. He believes that his apartment has been bugged. He destroys all the furniture searching for the mic.
It was obvious that Harry was being bugged, and that's at stake here too. Not only his own personal sense of jeopardy, but the notion that there's someone out there that's even better at the work than Harry Cole.
And the film leaves us with a doubt. Is there really a microphone? And if there is, where?
One of the most frequently asked questions that I'm asked is, where was the bug that bugged Harry at the end? Of course, many people have their theories.
There is one significant place very close to him that he did not look, where the microphone might be.
And then again, of course, there is always the possibility,
and I'll leave it to your imagination,
that there was no microphone, there was no bug, that the microphone really was more in Harry's degenerated state. I know it's very difficult for you to accept from me, but the truth of the matter is, I don't know where the microphone bug is.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Soon we will publish the next episode of the series, in which we will talk about the casting of the film, and we will go deeper into the character of Harry Cole.